before, these are called absolute value equations. So we're going to fill in, there are 3 steps at the top that we need to fill in, and then we'll actually go through the process together. So step number 1, when you're solving absolute value equations, you want to isolate the absolute value bars. So once isolate the bars, this simply means make sure there's not any other numbers outside of those bars or under the bars. Because if you notice, and if we take a look at some of these problems, you'll see how there's a 4 on the outside, there's a 3 under here. So all of that you would have to eliminate first. That would be the first step, is to isolate the bars, get them all by themselves, all right? Now, before I move on, let me ask you this question, because I know you guys know about absolute value and the definition and all of that. So if I had something like, give me 1 second to write it down. So if I say absolute value of x equals 4, then what could be the value of x? Yes. -4 could be something else. What else could it be? It could also be +4. Okay. And usually what we do put those answers in our little set brackets now, because we already know that the absolute value of 4 equals 4, and also the absolute value of -4 equals to 4. And that's going to be important, because then you're going to understand in a few minutes why do we separate the equation into 2 parts. And this is the reason, because the value of x could be negative or positive. Okay. All right, so let's go back to our steps. All right, so step 2, once you isolate the bars, if the number is negative, if the number equals a negative, and let's say this, if the equation equals a negative, and I'll go over this, equals a negative, then you stop and you simply write no solution. Okay. Now, why is that? Can you actually have something like this and it equals to a negative number? No. So once you isolate those bars and you see that that number after the equal sign is negative, you will simply write no solution for that. Okay. Let me put no here. No solution. Now, step 3, what if it comes out to be positive? Okay, so if it equals to a positive number, then what you're going to do is separate into 2 equations. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay, that's when we break it down and write 2 equations and then solve it from there. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start, and I don't want to start with questions 2 and 3. I want to actually start where there's something over there with the absolute value, so we can go through all 3 steps. All right, so let's start with question number 6. So in question number 6, the first step that we just wrote down says I have to isolate and get the absolute value bars by themselves. Since this -3 is being multiplied by the absolute value of 8 plus 9n, then I'm going to divide both sides by -3. Okay, so that eliminates that. All right, let me finish the example, then I'll answer questions. So that will eliminate the times 3 by doing the divided by 3. And then I'm going to keep the bars for right now and say 8 plus 9n. equals, and then what is negative 111 divided by a negative 3?
37.
Okay, should be a positive. Okay, because we have a negative divided by a negative. All right. So I jump all the way down to step 3 because it did not come out to be a negative number. So I continue now to number 3. It becomes a positive number after I've isolated. So now I'm going to separate it into 2 equations. Now up here in step 3, please also write drop the bars. That's important. When you separate it into 2 equations, you must drop the bars. So then you're going to drop the bars and you're going to write it exactly like you see it without the bars. That's one equation. Okay. The second one looks like this. Negative 37. Okay, we dropped the bars. Remember how we did that? Plus 4 or negative 4. So now we got plus 37 or negative 37. But again, you drop the bars. Now you just solve it. You solve it like you would an ordinary equation. So go ahead and solve it. I'm not going to go through that. I'm just going to ask someone for the answer in a minute. And when we use our answers, guys, when we write our final answer, we're going to use set brackets. Okay, I call them the little curly parentheses, but they're called set notation, so we're just going to use the set brackets. All right, so our 2 answers should be 29 over 9 and negative 5. You do not, it doesn't matter which one you write first because they're not coordinates. Okay, they're just solutions, so you don't need to worry about which one do I write first. They're not coordinates, so it doesn't matter. All right, let's do question number 7. Okay, so I'm just going to erase this so I'll have some more space. So in question number 7, anytime there's a plus or a minus in the problem, just like when we solve regular equations without having to start with that first. Okay, so I need to actually subtract 2 first. And I'm going to bring down this 3, absolute value of negative 6 plus 9r equals to 45. Okay, so start with that first. Any plus or minus, just like you normally would when you're solving a regular equation. You always do multiplication division last for the most part. So now we're going to divide by the 3 because that 3 is being multiplied. So that gets rid of that, or actually it makes it one whole. We don't need to write it. And then you have the absolute value of negative 6 plus 9r equals to what? 15. Very good. Okay, so now I'm going to drop the bars and I'm going to write it exactly like I see it. Okay, that's one of my equations there. And then when I write the second one, I'm just going to change it to a negative 15. Okay, so go ahead and solve both. The only common mistake that I see students do with these types of problems is they want to change what's inside of here. You don't change what's inside of here. It's only after the equal sign. You change to the negative 15. What's inside the bars stay on in both equations. So I'll wait till someone has the answer for that one. All right, so our 2 answers then become negative 1 and 7/3. Okay. All right, so let's move up to the top. We're going to do question number 5. So see in question number 5, it actually has divided by 3. So let's go ahead and multiply both sides by 3. So that's going to give me the absolute value of x minus 6 equals to 12. Okay. All right. So now we're ready to separate it because it equals to a positive 12. We can continue to move on. So my equations will be pretty simple. X minus 6 equals 12. And x minus 6 equals negative 12. All right. Add 6. You're going to get 18. Add 6, I'm going to get negative 6. So then you just use your set brackets and put 18 and -6. Okay. Is that pretty easy? All right, because everyone in here knows how to, isolate something from an equation. All right, we'll do number 4, and then we'll move on to the next page. Okay, in number 4, 4 is being multiplied by the absolute value of n, so I'm going to divide by 4 and simply write the absolute value of n equals what? 10. So this is easy. So what's my answers? 10 and -10. All right. All right, let's go down to here where it says absolute values that cannot be solved. Put up here, see step 2. We don't need to write it again. Remember, once you isolate it, we don't need to say isolate it, and if it equals to a negative all over again, just say see step 2. Okay, because we've already written that. All right, let's go to this page here. We're just going to do the 2 at the top. So look, step 1 is already done because the bars are isolated, but it equals to a negative. So what do you write? No solution. Okay. Let's look at number 10. I'm going to do the -6 first. Okay, because you always do the plus and minus stuff first. So that's going to give me -7 times absolute value of -8 minus 10n equals what? 50 what? 56. Okay. Then what do I do next? All right, I'm going to let you guys finish that one up and see what you get. Now you're dividing by a negative. What is 56 divided by -7? So -8. So what do you write? No solution. Okay, so once you isolate the absolute value bars, it becomes negative, so you don't need to go any further. Now, later in our unit, we'll talk about, well, what do you do when it's an inequality symbol? Okay, we're not going to do that lesson today. That's later in our unit. Okay. All right, any questions?